I would like to read two poems tonight, one I wrote and one I didn't. I'll begin with the one that I did write. It's a poem about my grandparents, and it's called My Shield and Portion B, which some of you may recognize from a hymn. She came when each new baby did, nursed my mother, comforted the tiny grandchild, cooked, scrubbed the floors, told stories, canned wild plums, sewed clothes for my sisters. No one can remember where she slept, and perhaps she didn't. Named Elizabeth and nothing else. Was there a shortage of names that year? Nicknamed Carrot Top for her red-orange hair, her Scotch-Irish skin. Mostly, she was called Lizzie. Left motherless when she was 9, my grandmother raised the younger 3, Isabel, William Henry, Anna Rebecca, molding the pattern of her life, mothering all others. Barely 17, she married the Dutchman, William Martin Himes. Hotter than Dutch love in the summertime, she would say, to our bewilderment. As adults, still puzzled, we question, Grandpa? Graves of their children mark places they lived, 2 in Illinois, 1 in North Dakota, 1 in Texas, my mother in South Dakota. I was 9, cuddled with Grandpa in his leather rocker in the sunroom, listening to twin sounds, the beat of his heart, the ticking of his gold pocket watch. My mother said, "Get down. 9 years is too old to sit on Grandpa's lap." In my ear, he whispered, "No, it's not." I thrilled to that mutiny, my first intimation that rules could be broken, more than one voice could be heard. Love might override decorum. In my life, told by priests or lovers or supervisors the way it must be, I heard again and again my grandpa's voice. No, it's not. For days he lay dying, reaching to the ceiling for deliverance from hands we could not see. On the 4th of July, my grandmother stood at the hospital window, watching fireworks from the park. Light from one long finger of one Chinese prodigy reached into the room, sought, and held his hand. In that burst of light and sound and glory, he was released, transported. She turned from the window, he was gone, and she never watched fireworks again. Sun-spotted hands, a wide gold band on her middle finger, hair all white like a Republican's hope for heaven. She favored black energetics, walked in the present increasingly as if it were the past. Mine now, the amber glass dishes, the Algonquin silver, her shawl, a string of crystal beads, a writing desk sent on the train from Sears Roebuck to the North Dakota homestead. Sanctified by use and association, no trace attends of her passions, griefs, loves. She lived 14 years after his death, gradually becoming the citizen of another country, one where Grandpa was alive, needed his meals, her. Perhaps again, she was the young wife on the ox cart journey from Texas to Illinois, watching and fearing feathered Comanches riding the horizon. Did she again make stories from shapes seen in the clouds? Certainly, she returned to the woman my mother remembered at North Dakota barn dances, dancing the schottische to the music of the fiddle all through the night. The other poem I didn't write, but I wished I would have. Jessamine West, the novelist, said that the life we really lead is not the life that people see us lead. And in that life, I might have written this. It's called The Horse of Joan of Arc. You know that they burned her horse before her. Though it is not recorded, you know that they burned her Percheron first, before her eyes, because you know that story. So old, that story, the routine story carried to its extreme, of the cruelty that can make of what a woman hears a silence, that can make of what a woman sees a lie. She had no son for them to burn, for them to take from her in the world, not of her making, and put to its pyre. So they layered a greater one in front of where she was staked to her own. As you have seen her pictured sometimes, her eyes raised to the sky, but they were not raised. This is yet one of their lies. They were not closed, though her hands were bound behind her, and her feet were bound deep in what would become fire. She watched. Of greenwood stakes, head high and thicker than a man's waist, they laced the narrow corral that would not burn until flesh had burned and bone was burning, and laid it thick with tinder, fatted wicks and sulfur, kindling and logs, and ran a ramp up to its height from where the gray horse waited, his dapples making of his flesh a living metal, layers of life through which the light shone out in places as it seems to through the flesh of certain fish. A light she knew as purest, coming like that from within. Not flinching, not praying, she looked the last time on the body she knew better than the flesh of any man or child or woman, having long since left the lap of her mother, the chest with its perfect plate of muscles, the neck with its perfect prow-like curve, the hindquarters, pistons, powerful cleft, pennoned with the silk of his tail. Having ridden as they did together, those places, that hard, that long, their eyes found easiest that day the way to each other, their bodies wedded in a sacrament unmediated by man. With fire, they drove him up the ramp and off into the pyre, and tossed the flame in with him. This was the last chance they gave her to recant her world in which their power came not from God. Unmoved, the men of God began watching him burn, and better, watching her watch him burn. Hearing the long, mad, godlike trumpet of his terror, his crashing in the wood, the groan of stakes that held, the silver black hide, the pricked ears catching first like driest bark, and the eyes. And she knew by this agony that she might choose to live still if she would but make her sign on the parchment they would lay before her, which now would include this new truth, that it did not happen. This death in the circle, the rearing, plunging, raging, the splendid armor-colored head raised one last time above the flames before they took him, like any game untended on the spit, into their yellow-green, their blackening red. That poem is by Linda McCarriston.